Welcome back to another episode of Automotivated. I'm here with JB. Thank you again for joining us today.
No problem. And let me just do one thing right now. Auto motivated. Because every time you ask me to say it, I don't say it right. So I got to
One of these
practice.
times we're going to get it. It's practice, right?
Yes, it is. Automotivated.
So are you feeling automotivated? It sounds like it.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to have a conversation today. We have had the opportunity to work with our friends over at Ratchet and Wrench to really talk about some of the bottlenecks that we're seeing in the industry. And one really interesting conversation that came up was really looking at disproportionate closing rates and what that means for the shops. And right before we hopped on, we were talking a little bit about how ARO, your average repair order, and closing rate are typically linked closely together. However, there really is a divide between the two. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, even before we get to that, let's talk about what a closing ratio is. All right. Because some people might be like, well, what do you mean? Very basically, if you have 10 jobs and you manage to sell 4 out of those 10, upsell 4 out of those 10, you have a closing ratio of 40%. And what that means is that, every interaction you have with a customer, how successful or not successful are you in upselling extra work? So that's what closing ratio pretty much comes into in the simplest form. But I like to say that you need to measure it to grow it. It's one of my favorite sayings, and because you can't grow it if you don't know if it's growing or if it's shrinking. But the point being here is closing ratio is only one of the formulas that you need to be aware of. Your average repair order, the amount of dollars per repair order, is another very significant figure that you have to keep in mind. And there's even more about the closing ratio, because are you doing a generalized closing ratio?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you getting and just doing it on your low end stuff, your quick and easy things, your mid cost things, and your high tech things? Because if you do it across the board, your numbers are going to get skewed, especially if you sell an awful lot of the low end stuff. Your
Sure.
closing ratio is high, but your ARO is down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fine balancing act that you have to do there. So is it one thing? Is it really a number that by itself that should be considered? No, it definitely want to take other things in.
Absolutely. And I think you made a really great point there when you talk about some of the low hanging fruit when it comes to the services that are being offered. And one of the things that we discuss in the breaking bottlenecks is the whole idea that sometimes we have services that are based on mileage, others are based off of our recommendations. So really, what should the service advisor be discussing with the customers as they come in based on the services that they need?
Well, all the OEMs do have a specific mileage and time interval for a lot of their services. So that's one of the things that should be a conversation when you're making the appointment, actually. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an important point, Shannon, too, is that you should have a lot of this conversation at the appointment making, not the day they arrive, because everyone's in a hurry to get in and out as fast as they can. So the
Of
more you
course.
have from the appointment, the better it is. So that definitely is something that should be brought to the customer. Secondly, you're doing a courtesy inspection.
Mm-hmm.
That is a visual, hands-on inspection of the vehicle to see how it looks, what's going on. You might find, an oil leak. You might find that the brakes are lower, the tires are worn. All those items have to be found and put in front of your customer, and it's better to do that once the vehicle's there. And what I highly suggest is using a digital inspection,
Mm-hmm.
because the digital inspection allows your customer, basically, no matter where they are, to walk around the car with you and see exactly what you're talking about. And matter of fact, if you did an inspection last time the car was here, you can use the photos from that inspection today when the customer drops off and shows them what's going on. So it's building that trust. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we really want to do.
Absolutely. And I think that level of trust is so important because, as you had said, the trust isn't just while they're at the shop for their service that day. It really starts in conversations before, because um, there's a level of expectations that are set. And that really helps people be prepared so they know exactly what's needed, exactly what is recommended. So that way, not only are they in the best health with their vehicle, but they're also in good health standings when it comes to financing and what they need to prepare for and what they need to look out for.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Keeping recommendations and everything in front of your customer, so when they come back, they mentally and financially prepare. Now, here's one of the things to be aware of. Many people that use this closing ratio only applies to today. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't apply to anything you might set your customer up for in the future, which leads to another important point about the closing ratio. Your customers that are coming back, you
Mm-hmm.
have a much better chance of closing on them than
Sure.
brand new customers. So when you're looking at that number, you got to balance those two. So you can see the closing ratio has something to offer, but there's so many other items that we need to keep track of to make sure it's a good number. So
And now, in your recommendation, what would you say shops really should be looking at the closing ratio for?
you mean like a percentage or something of that sort?
I would even just say what is the point of them looking at a closing ratio? So for me, I think it does show the level of communication between the service advisor and the customer that comes in. But is there anything else that you can think of that number is important to show you key success factors within your shop?
Well, I mean, if you have three writers, you would expect that their closing ratios would all be about the same. All right. And no, and again, accounting for all the odds and ends that I've already mentioned, if it's applied against a whole desk and you have two individuals that are doing really well, 60, 70% across the board, and one individual that's hanging around 30, well, one of the things it does for you, it helps you educate that person. Why
Mhm.
are you so far below the rest of them? Because are they presenting everything to the customer? Are they making sure to? Are they afraid to present stuff? So it can bring things like that out into the light that you may not see otherwise.
Mhm.
But again, it has to apply equally to all the individuals to make it work for that.
Absolutely. So JB, what would you recommend shops do, knowing that, closing ratio and ARO aren't always compatible as many people think? What would you say are the next steps for shop owners to take with them to help improve their shops?
Well, first off, be sure that we are having the conversation about the OEM stuff that needs to be done time and mileage. Secondly, and I think more importantly, is doing that inspection and making sure that you have an individual involved. The person that's actually doing the inspection know what they're looking at. And just to explain that a little bit, I've been in shops where they hire an individual with really no background. They show them how to put a car in a lift, they show them how to look at all the good stuff that we can make a little money on, but they miss everything else. And that's kind of crazy because many of these cars with 100,000 miles on it, I've gone underneath the car after the tech looks at it, and I've pulled a list out like original shocks, the bushings are all cracked and falling apart. There's so much on there, so that inspection up front has to be done. And even after that, it's wasted if that advisor is not presenting it to the customer.
Mhm.
So there's a whole lot of series of steps that you want to look from the inspection to the customer getting it to coming back, and that ratio is going to help measure that.
Perfect. I think this is a really interesting conversation, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions when people look at closing rates. Are they closing the right things? What is really the process for them closing certain services? Is it this visit? Is it next visit? Is it the visit after that? And really looking at all of these factors that are really going to be a differentiator between closing rates from customer to customer. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we were able to break this down a little bit. As we had said before, this is part of one of our collaboration opportunities with Ratchet and Wrench. So we'll be sure to leave the link down below if you are interested in any more information. But make sure to check out, make sure to check out the Breaking Bottlenecks in our partnership with Ratchet and Wrench. And let's see if we got this one. Ready? I know I'm automotivated. Are you
And
automotivated?
I am automotivated. Woohoo!
Yes. All right. Well, JB, thank you so much for joining us as always. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Everybody
All
take
right. Thanks,
care.
everyone.